Pop, I thought it was more of just a consistency thing with Pop because the team was very good for so long. But when it came to the championships, I thought Kerr and I thought Field did that better in short periods of time than he did. The repeating is hard. The three-peating is just about impossible to do. So that's what puts Field number one. But Kerr's even repeated. Pop's never done that. He's never done it, and Kerr dominated over a 7-year period. He had 4 championships. So, and I just like Kerr's style better. I think he works better with more players than Pop. Pop has to have a certain player, and if you don't fit, he don't want you. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just they're all successful. I just like those two guys and appreciate what they did more than what Pop did. So that's why I went, start Field, Biggs, Kerr, cut Pop.
You know what's crazy, and I feel I'm like upset at myself, but bro, that wasn't bad reasoning. Like I could get on that train, and that feels nasty saying because Coach Pop is a legend.
It's not disrespectful though. I mean, he's not the only.
No,
legend,
for sure.
Though. Yeah.
To me, it just sounds like a preference in coaching style, though.
You said what?
To me, that just sounds like a preference in coaching style because obviously, nothing's wrong with Pop's coaching, nothing's wrong with Steve Kerr's coaching. When you're talking about the adjustments that Steve Kerr is able to make, I can say, you know what, I appreciate the style in the sense, of Pop in the sense that like he has put a signature on the game the way that Steve Kerr hasn't, because Steve Kerr is more so reliant on having all of these, mega stars and all of these players. I think the big time names that Steve Kerr has had are bigger than what Pop has had, right?
Really?
We talk about, KD and Steph. I think they're bigger than Tim Duncan and David Robinson, or who else?
David Robinson?
Yeah, Tim Duncan and David Robinson is what I'm saying, yeah.
Kawhi Leonard?
And at the same time, okay, I mean, maybe Kawhi, he was a puppy, you know what I mean? And so he kind of like came into his own and everybody started paying attention to him when he won the finals MVP. But we can't act like, everybody was like, yo, who is this winning finals MVP? And that is also the reason why people are saying anybody wins finals MVP. The fact that Kawhi turned out to be whoever he is now is, is just favoring him or whatever. But I think, everybody's saying, Andre Iguodala won finals MVP. And so when it comes to the Steve Kerr, with the Steph Curry KD thing versus Tim Duncan and David Robinson, both of those guys were in the prime. David Robinson was already on the decline when it comes to him playing together with Tim Duncan. And Tim Duncan, of course, he came into the league killing or whatever, but he wasn't where he eventually would end up, when it comes to this prime type of stuff. So I don't think Pop has had the same type of weaponry that Kerr has had, in my opinion.
Okay. That's fair, I guess. I would disagree because I think he has. He's got a top 5 player all time, in my opinion, in Duncan, the best power forward to ever play the game. And that was the meat of his success. No Duncan, no success. The other guys, they've won with multiple guys too.
Kerr, greatest shooter ever. Not no top 5, doubt. Greatest shooter ever. And
I get it.
For a long time, they was talking about Clay. And I'm not trying to say like Clay, because everybody, now people are saying it's like, okay, he wasn't really like that or whatever, for whatever reason, recency bias or whatever. But at the time, everybody was saying that these two undoubtedly are top 2 shooters of all time. So when you're talking about Tim Duncan being top 5 power forward of all time, people are saying
top
Clay,
5
top 5 shooter.
Of all time.
Okay.
I have,
but still, you know what I mean? If you are in the shooting system, a top 5 shooter of all time, like that's just as much value. And then you have 2 of them. And not only do you have 2 of them at 4 and 5 or whatever, you could say Clay is 5th. I don't really care because you do have the number 1 shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So like that, I don't see how that is worse than having Tim Duncan and whatever else the Spurs may have.
I only had 3 options. He could have been the 7th man coming off the bench, but I didn't have it as an option. So when I had those 3 as an option, if I had to choose, I like what Steve Kerr did more than I like what Pop did. Now, to me, Pop's, again, is more of a longevity thing. because they had a sustainedness of greatness. What was it, 50 wins or whatever it was, all the playoffs he was doing for 15, 20 years. That's more what I give Pop credit for. You know, now it's 5 chips, they're great, but there's a lot of coaches that's got 5 chips. You know, he's not the only one.
So we're just going to have to wait and see how, what Steve Kerr's longevity is going to look like.
Yes, because Pop is about done. We know Pop's run is about over. I don't see him getting any more. I don't know if it's a record he's going after, most wins, whatever it may be, but his run is about over. So we'll have to see how Steve Kerr, and I gave Steve Kerr props for winning this past year, because everybody said, oh, well, KD this, KD that, that's one reason, blah, blah, blah. He came back and showed they won without KD. So he won before, and when it's almost like people forgot that. It's like people forgot the fact they won before KD came. Then they won with KD when he clearly, to me, still had Steph and Draymond as the leaders. It wasn't just KD. He just came and balled out. And then when they won afterward, that put another notch on his resume as a coach, in my personal opinion. So, and again, it is partly a preference. I do think, like, as a player, if I had to pick which one of those coaches I think I would want to play for, it would be in that same order. I would want to play for Phil first. I would want to play for Kerr second, and Pop last. Pop might have made me pop him. You know what I mean? He might have made me pop him. The way he come in your face and talk crazy, I'm not with all that. I'm not with all that.
I'm not with that either.
I don't know, man. I mean, if we're talking about who would you rather play for, I would rather play for Kerr, because I'm not trying to be in that triangle. Number one.
I don't mind a triangle. If it's my game, I don't mind a triangle at all.
So if we're talking about, like, I'm talking about me and, like, how I would prefer to play, I would cut Phil just based off of that.
Okay.
Elder Rufus, we're getting the popcorn again. Did you say that you might have had a mic somewhere?
I got an earpiece. I don't have a mic.
We might as well try it, because we're back to the popcorn stuff, and
okay.
We'll try whatever we can. But we'll before we move on, Aaron, Mars, do you guys have a horse in this race, or?
I mean, I said on the panel, I'm starting Pop, bench, and Phil, cutting Kerr. But Steve Kerr, I don't think Steve Kerr is in that tier of coaches yet, but that was the start, bench, cut. But I think there's still a few coaches I'd name before I'd name Steve Kerr. But he's still one of the best coaches in the NBA today, but he's not an all-time to those guys' level, in my opinion.
You said Pop, Phil, Kerr, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's mine as well. I look at Pop, and we've talked about this so many times now on Player's Choice, but Pop did more with less, in my opinion. But Aaron, you got an opinion on this?
I mean, I like Pop. I'd probably put Pop first. He played with won with 3 different teams, basically, and 3 different styles. Everyone thinks it's the same style, but like he won with Tim Duncan and David Robinson as like the 2 big men, and then in 2007 it was mostly Duncan with like defense, and then I mean those Spurs in like 14, 15, 16, 17 were nasty, and that was shooting. Like they destroyed the Heat because of 3-point shooting and like ball movement and it, like basically doing what Kerr was doing before like the Warriors did it. They just didn't have Steph. And they with Kawhi still they were like still good. Like they were conference finals, right? If Kawhi didn't get injured, they probably could have won that year. So I mean, I don't know, but I don't really know that much about Phil's like. I mean, I know the triangle, but he had some of the best players of all time, so it's just hard for me to even.
Phil was more of a player.
He also had one of the best assistants in Tex. Let's not forget that.
Someone commented, said Phil just managed egos. He literally ran the exact same strategy with all his championship teams. I wanted that first part where, that's what I was going to say. I think what all 3 of them, they have an amazing ability of managing egos. Like you don't really see guys playing for those coaches that have where they can't get their egos in check, if that makes sense. Like you could, how do I explain this? Like there might be guys on those teams that have egos, but the ego doesn't get in the way of the team's success. Does that make sense?
So what's Draymond Green been doing?
I mean, Draymond Green did run KD out of town.
Draymond Green got KD out by calling him a bitch. He punched Jordan Poole in the face. And the best he's got is a 1-game suspension for all of that.
I think
Steve Kerr won the championship last year.
I think Steve Kerr
also limited our success in 2020 because KD was gone. And in 2021
in 2015, right? right? When he
2016, Draymond Green got suspended because he couldn't handle his emotions. Like, there's a lot of issues we've had where
2016,
you could argue we've lost championships because Draymond Green couldn't handle his emotions. And if we're talking about handling egos,
Steve Kerr
that's
hasn't
relevant.
handled egos at all. The biggest ego he's had is Draymond Green. Steph don't have an ego. Clay don't have an ego. KD don't even have an ego. The biggest egos he's ever had to deal with Draymond Green. So that whole ego, him handling players, doesn't work when he's playing with guys that's easy as hell to get along with.
Well,
And the
how
one
do you?
guy
How,
who
but how do
hasn't
you?
been
How do you know that
hasn't
guys that
been
aren't like
handled.
at the end of the bench don't have egos? How do you know?
Oh my God! Are
I'm
we
being
serious?
serious. Just because they're not the face of the team
No,
doesn't mean they don't have
maybe they
egos.
do. Maybe they do, but maybe they don't. So the one
Sean
guy
Livingston?
we know who has an
Bro,
ego.
I had an ego. I played like 2 minutes
Sean
a game.
Livingston? Iggy, come on, bro. Iggy showed he didn't have an ego when he allowed himself to get put on the bench.
No one said that he did. What do you?
You're talking about bench players having egos, like, bro.
And you say one
main-
player. You don't know
Sean
who has egos
Livingston.
and who
Sean,
doesn't, and
you
who
really
you have to
think
manage.
you think Sean Livingston?
I
really has
don't know, Dub.
Are you
just
serious?
keep saying one player.
That's two. I just named you two.
Congratulations.
What are we doing?
Over how many years in every single player that's played under him?
Yeah, but
Bro,
we
who
can
off
always
the
talk,
bench
we
is
can
an
always
ego?
talk about who we don't know has an ego, but who we do know has an ego is Draymond Green.
Yeah.
And what we
there
do
you go.
know is Draymond Green's ego has cost the Warriors many times. So I could argue Steve Kerr's ego management, if that's a thing, hasn't been great
Ego
because the one
management.
player we know who has an ego hasn't been managed very well, in my opinion. Whereas with
He
Popovich,
won 4 chips with him.
Popovich just
That's
didn't
what.
deal with people
Thank
with
you.
ego.
He won
Yeah,
4
and
chips with him.
we
How
could
is
have
he
won,
not
and we
managing
could
his
have won
ego?
in 2016. We could have won in 2016 if he managed his
But
ego.
he won.
And we could have won in 2020
won
if KD
4
stayed and he
chips
didn't
with
get
the
called a
dude.
B-word.
He won
You
4
can-
chips
you
with
can
dude, but
always
he
win
wasn't the
more.
best player.
And you can always win more.
No. I'm going to the argument that he didn't manage his ego well. He won all 4 of his chips with this same guy that has an ego problem.
And he could have won 5 and he could have won 6, but he didn't manage it correctly.
Wow.
Don't you
That's-
credit that?
Doesn't mean he wasn't successful, but it doesn't
I
mean
don't
he can't be
understand
more
that thinking.
successful.
Wouldn't you
Honestly,
just credit that to Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry in general and the team just being better in order for them to overcome an ego like Draymond Green? I mean, let's be real. They did lose in 2016 mainly because Draymond Green, he couldn't control his emotions. Nobody controls Draymond Green
I don't
Nobody
necessarily
controls
know
Draymond
that
Green
cost
there.
them. I don't know that cost
I
them.
think
was
it
just
did.
important.
It could
It
be
was just as
argued it
important
cost
that they
them.
lost the center, the Australian dude. They
Both
lost
of
him
them.
and they lost
Bogut.
all their rim protection.
Yeah. I agree with that,
So
but
he was just as important of a loss. Did Draymond miss 1 game? I don't understand that thinking. I don't understand that thinking.
But the way that everyone's trying to credit Steve Kerr and him handling egos, the one ego where he's supposed to control, he didn't really do a good job of doing that, is what we're saying. Draymond Green, nobody tells him in that Warriors organization shit. There's a reason, and KD and Draymond Green, whenever that shit went down, they didn't do anything about it. And KD even said it.
Draymond was told to apologize and he laughed at the management. He laughed at them. That's not managing egos. That's clearly undermining authority.
That's
And
crazy.
I think both are correct. You know, I guess if you can look at it like that, right? So Steve Kerr obviously managed Draymond the best way that he could be managed, which, you know, is turning out to be an unmanageable situation. And he still was able to get 4 chips out of that. Could he have gotten more? I believe so. And to Mars's point, you know, we can point at a specific play that Draymond was involved in that pretty much cost him the championship, right? Or at least a chance, like a legit chance to win it. So I see both points. Well, my question is, though, Mars, are you off Draymond?
No. I still believe Draymond Green's been our second most important player for this run, but I just don't think if we're talking about ego.
No, I mean,
no,
that's past. I'm talking about moving
No,
forward.
I'm not off. I'm not off Draymond. I still think this season he's been our second or third best player. Him or Wiggins, I don't know.
So Phil did a bad job managing egos in 04 too, right?
Yeah, Phil was. It was pretty evident he had a problem with Kobe Bryant, and he wanted the team to decide between him and Kobe. It was pretty evident that he had a problem with Kobe. He wanted to keep Shaq and not Kobe. He also had the same issues. Popovich is notorious for not wanting to keep guys who think they're bigger than the team. So they all have issues managing egos. I just don't know why it was a topic of discussion.
I just like the
I
fact
wanted
that
it to
these
be.
guys like Phil and what's the name can manage it and still win with these kind of guys.
Well,
Pop
Greg,
is not dealing with that.
Phil managed Dennis Rodman, but
Yeah.
Popovich couldn't.
He managed Michael Jordan. He managed Scottie Pippen. He managed all these dudes.
Actually,
He managed Shaq. He managed Kobe. I mean, these are major egos. And he
Yeah,
won with all these guys.
Steve Kerr-
but yet now
Steve
we're
Kerr
talking
has
about how many can you juggle at the same time, pause, because if you only have Michael Jordan, right, and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, that's three guys as opposed to, everybody else like a Scotty Burrell, Ron Harper and whoever who are there solely to just. And this is what the interview that I did with Craig Hodges. Shout out again. We're not the same. Go ahead, check that out. But he was talking about how he had of course an ego as well. Everybody had an ego. If I'm playing, if I'm on the court, I'm gonna contribute. I'm not gonna defer to Michael. If I have an open shot, I'm gonna shoot that thing. As opposed to what Phil wanted to do. He was like, yo man, this is the triangle, like we're gonna run this way or whatever. And so now you're gonna have to, whatever touches that you had, they're gonna come down, and you're gonna have to funnel all of that to Mike and whoever else. And so if he had been like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that, then it would have been a bigger issue. And so to me, what Phil, when it comes to like managing egos, or even like, Steve Kerr, right? There are more egos that he has to manage than a Pop, for example, because to Mars's point, Pop is not dealing with anybody who thinks that's bigger than a team. And so there's no egos to handle for real.
And another point I do want to address is that I think Greg Popovich, you could argue that he has actually adjusted more in his career than Steve Kerr. I mean, every time when he won a chip, it was a lot of the times it was a different roster. Him leaning on David Robinson and Tim Duncan. Then in 03 with a rookie Manu, and then a young Tony Parker, and Tim Duncan really being the main guy. All the way to 2014, where those guys were deteriorating and not the same, and he was able to adapt to a more team-oriented type of basketball play, which led to their victory. I could just sit here and argue that he's adjusted more. He's a guy that's figured it out more and did it longer than Steve Kerr, with a lesser supporting cast of a Steve Kerr than, KD, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green.
It's the player choice way. Yeah, them boys don't get it started. The player choice way. The player choice way. Come and switch lanes into the player choice way.